Imagine moving into a neighborhood where everything seems perfect. Charming houses nestled under the shade of ancient oaks, quiet streets with pristine sidewalks where kids ride bikes and adults leisurely walk their dogs at dusk. You think you've found the ideal place to settle down, a place where you can build lasting memories, connect with friendly neighbors, and feel the warmth of a true community. But then, a small mistake, a truck parked slightly off, a letter sent to the wrong address ignites a never-ending series of dramas with a neighbor who seems harmless at first glance. That's my story with Karen, the woman living across the street, who turned my peaceful days into a silent war with her bizarre actions, baseless accusations, and an unrelenting attitude of hostility. When we moved into this neighborhood 3 years ago, my husband and I were instantly captivated by its charm. The houses weren't ostentatious, but each had its own character, with well-kept lawns, small gardens bursting with wild daisies, and white picket fences. Every morning, I'd see neighbors grabbing their newspapers, waving at each other, or pausing for a quick chat about the weather or weekend plans. We quickly made friends with the families around us. The Millers with their two energetic kids, the Thompsons, an elderly couple always eager to share stories about the neighborhood's history, and Sarah, a single mom with a radiant smile who brought homemade cookies to every community gathering. Within months, we were joining backyard barbecues, outdoor movie nights in the summer, and even helped organize a small charity flea market to raise funds for the local school. This neighborhood wasn't just a place to live. It was a real community where people cared for and supported one another. But not everyone welcomed us with open arms. From the very first days, I noticed the scrutinizing gaze from the house across the street, where Karen, a middle-aged woman living alone, often stood by her window with a cold expression. She had short, silver hair, always wore dark sweaters regardless of the warm weather, and rarely left her house except to check her mailbox or tend to the shrubs in her front yard. I didn't think much of her demeanor at first. Maybe she was just reserved or needed time to warm up to new faces. But I was wrong. It all started with a minor incident on moving day. My husband, while backing up the moving truck, parked a bit too close to Karen's mailbox. There was no collision, no damage, just a slight inconvenience that we thought was negligible. We even planned to go over and apologize while introducing ourselves. But before we could, the rumors started. Through Sarah, we learned that Karen had sent a message in a group chat of longtime residents, calling my husband an idiot and complaining that we were disrespectful for letting our truck invade her space. The message, forwarded to Sarah by a former resident, was the first sign that Karen wasn't as approachable as the rest of the neighborhood. I tried not to dwell on it, thinking maybe she was just having a bad day or didn't like newcomers. I told myself time would smooth things over, but I was mistaken in thinking it would end there. Karen didn't stop at talking behind our backs. She began expressing her discontent more openly. One time, she posted a lengthy rant on the neighborhood's homeowners association, HOA, app, accompanied by a slew of screenshots from her front door security camera capturing people walking their dogs. She claimed it was illegal and a violation of private property for dogs to step on her lawn, even threatening to call the police if it continued. The post sparked a small uproar in our online community. Some neighbors tried to explain that dogs walking on the edge of a lawn was normal and that the strip of grass by the road wasn't entirely private property, but Karen wouldn't listen. Eventually, the HOA president, Mr. Thompson, stepped in, politely but firmly asking her to stop posting such divisive content. I realized Karen didn't just have an issue with us. She had a problem with the entire neighborhood. She seemed to always be looking for something to complain about, criticize, or stir up drama. From stories shared by neighbors, I learned that Karen had lived here for years, and her strange behavior wasn't new. The Thompsons mentioned that she used to be fairly friendly when she first moved in, but after her husband passed away over a decade ago, she became increasingly withdrawn, irritable, and paranoid. Some said she believed neighbors were deliberately making noise to bother her or suspected kids in the neighborhood of intentionally damaging her garden. One neighbor recounted how Karen once stood in her front yard, yelling at a child for dropping a piece of chalk on the sidewalk near her house, leaving the kid in tears and forcing the mother to come over and apologize despite the triviality of the incident. Another neighbor, Mike, said Karen had sent him an email complaining about leaves from his yard falling onto hers, demanding he clean them up or face a lawsuit. These stories made it clear that Karen wasn't just difficult. She seemed to live in a world of suspicion and insecurity, where everyone around her was a threat. But the incident that truly shocked me happened about a year and a half ago, marking the peak of our tense relationship with Karen. My credit card had expired, and the company sent me a new one. When I updated my address over 2 years ago, I accidentally entered the wrong house number, 1213 instead of 1212, Karen's address. It was a small mistake, the kind anyone could make, especially when settling into a new place. I had no idea about the mix-up until the police knocked on my door one afternoon. A young officer, looking both polite and exasperated, explained that Karen had called 911, accusing me of trying to steal her identity because my credit card was sent to her address. I was stunned, unable to believe that a simple error had been blown out of proportion into a serious crime. The name on the card was clearly mine, not hers, and anyone could have seen it was just a mailing mistake. But Karen, in her paranoia, chose to call the police instead of knocking on my door to return the card. The officer said he tried to explain to her that this wasn't a case of identity theft, just a clerical error, but she refused to listen. He described her as a bored woman with nothing better to do, and I could sense the frustration in his voice. What infuriated me most was when I asked the officer to go back and retrieve my card. Karen refused to hand it over and even tore it up right in front of him. That act wasn't just absurd, it was illegal, as tampering with someone else's mail is a federal offense. I stood there, feeling a mix of anger, helplessness, and a strange amusement at the sheer ridiculousness of the situation. My husband, always the calm one, just shook his head and said we shouldn't waste energy on someone like Karen. But deep down, I couldn't help feeling hurt. We had tried to be good neighbors, always greeting people, keeping our yard tidy, and joining in community activities. Yet, because of one small mistake, we were treated like criminals. After that incident, I started paying more attention to Karen, not out of spite, but because I wanted to understand why she acted this way. I noticed she rarely left her house, except to check her mailbox or tend to her small garden. She had installed additional security cameras, not just at her front door, but also in her backyard. And once I caught her standing by her window, staring at the street as if monitoring every move in the neighborhood. Sarah told me Karen had emailed her, demanding she stop her son from playing basketball in the street because the sound of the ball bouncing gave her headaches. Mike shared that Karen once stood in his front yard, pointing at a shrub and demanding he trim it because it blocked her view. These stories didn't just annoy me. They made me wonder if Karen was living in a world where she felt constantly threatened. Perhaps loneliness, past loss, or some unseen pressure had shaped her into this person. But whatever the reason, her presence made the neighborhood feel tense. Every time I stepped outside, I wondered if she was watching from her window or plotting her next complaint. I started feeling like I was walking on eggshells, always cautious not to inadvertently provoke her. Once, when I accidentally dropped a small trash bag near the communal dumpster, I worried she'd take a photo and post it on the HOA app to call me out. Luckily, that didn't happen, but the lingering tension was undeniable. Meanwhile, our other neighbors became our biggest support. Sarah often invited us over for dinner, and those evenings of laughter and conversation helped me let go of my frustration with Karen. The Thompsons, with their years of wisdom, advised me that the best way to handle people like Karen was to ignore them. She just wants attention, Mrs. Thompson said, and if you don't give it to her, she'll get bored. Mike, with his sense of humor, turned Karen's antics into lighthearted stories, treating her like a quirky character in a sitcom. Thanks to these neighbors, I learned to stop letting Karen dominate my thoughts. Though destroying my credit card was undeniably illegal, I chose not to report her. Part of me didn't want to escalate things. I didn't want our neighborhood to become a battleground of disputes and lawsuits. Another part of me felt a pang of pity for Karen. She seemed to live in a world of suspicion and fear, where everyone was an enemy. I wondered if her loneliness or past traumas had made her this way, and I didn't want to be the one to add to her misery. Instead, I chose to live as peacefully as possible, continuing to join neighbors for gatherings, tending to my small garden, and cherishing moments with my family. But I couldn't deny that passing by Karen's house still brought a twinge of unease, like walking through an invisible minefield. I started double-checking my habits, like ensuring every package had the correct address to avoid another mix-up or avoiding walking too close to her property to prevent misunderstandings. These small changes, though minor, made me realize that Karen, intentionally or not, had influenced how I lived in the neighborhood I loved. Through this experience, I learned valuable lessons about handling unnecessary conflicts. Karen may be a difficult neighbor, but she's also a reminder that not everyone sees the world the same way. Some people are trapped in their fears, insecurities, or hidden wounds we can't see. Confronting or retaliating only makes things worse, while patience and compassion can help us maintain inner peace. I remember one evening, sitting on our porch with my husband, watching kids play in the street and hearing laughter from Sarah's backyard. In that moment, I realized Karen, no matter how hard she tried, couldn't destroy the sense of community we'd built. Our wonderful neighbors, shared moments, and sense of belonging were far stronger than her dramas. I began applying this lesson to other parts of my life. When facing stress at work or dealing with difficult people elsewhere, I reminded myself that not every conflict needs a fight. Sometimes, the best way to win is to stay calm, focus on the positive, and not let people like Karen dim your joy. My neighborhood remains a wonderful place to live, despite Karen's presence. The backyard barbecues still happen, the daisies still bloom, and the smiles of our neighbors still warm my heart every day. Karen may continue her dramas, but I'll keep living my life, with joy, with friends, and with the belief that kindness is always stronger than negativity. Life will always have its Karens, people who seem determined to make things more complicated than necessary. But through this story, I've learned that how we respond to them matters far more than what they do. I choose not to let Karen's hostility shape my life, and I hope anyone reading this will find their own way to handle the Karens in their lives with calm, patience, and compassion. In the end, I still believe that the good things will always outweigh the small troubles, and my neighborhood, with all its wonderful people, will always be the place I call home.